All right. Welcome back to the Board Drill Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Kyle. Tonight, not with me is my co-host, Matt. It's a Mattless episode. They happen from time to time, but Matt, we miss you, so get back on. But, we keep journeying on, and tonight we have a special guest. We have Coach Brian Wille, the offensive coordinator at Fairmont High School in Minnesota. Coach, welcome to the Board Drill.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you.
One thing stays for sure, Matt, we're always going to have the applause, and that's really what matters, right, Coach?
Absolutely. Got to feel welcome when you come in.
I love it. So Coach joins us, Minnesota, I think maybe we've had one other coach from Minnesota, but lately we've been very cognizant of keeping track of the states where our coaches come from. Early on it was like, can we get enough guests? And now we're blessed to have a bunch of guests on here. So we like to track all the states. We had our first Mississippi coach last night, which was really cool. And now we have Minnesota on. So we're hitting all the M states. So we're good there. Maybe Maine next. So
yeah, why not? Don't short yourself.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about seam reads. And so here in a minute, I'm going to have Coach load up his presentation. So Coach, go ahead and share it with us. And while he's sharing that, just want to encourage you guys again to follow us on all of our accounts. You can follow us on YouTube at Board Drill, follow us on Twitter at Board Drill, TikTok, which blew up the other day, which is pretty crazy. We got 80,000 views on one episode, which I never would have thought would ever happen. So if you're a TikTok coach, follow us on TikTok, and most of all, www.boarddrill.com, where we write all of our articles. So that's my quick pub for the Board Drill stuff. Back to you, Coach Wille. Let's talk some seam reads tonight.
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak with you guys. I mean, I've been following you guys here since you've been putting out content, and I've, for myself, found a lot of good, helpful information from it that certainly has made me a better coach. And I know our players and will hopefully benefit from that, hopefully in the future as well.
Love to hear it.
Well, thank you. Let's talk just a little bit about, the presentation tonight's going to be seam reads, a little bit about myself. I don't like to talk a ton about myself just in terms of background and all, but I do think it's a little bit helpful just to kind of know where I'm coming from. I have been teaching and coaching here at Fairmont High School for the last 10 years. Prior to that, I coached for 3 years at Redwood Valley High School in Redwood Falls, Minnesota. But over the last 10 years, I've really served a lot of different positions here at Fairmont. My first year here, I was the freshman coach. Or my second year here, I was the JV sophomore coach. And then the third year, I was elevated to offensive coordinator on the varsity, where I've served the last 7 years. I've been the offensive line coach here ever since as well. And so what led me to the seam read, really kind of figuring out like what it exactly is, why we need it, really stemmed from kind of an experience I had back in 2023 in the playoffs. We see a lot of really good defensive coordinators here in southern Minnesota. And I think a lot of times people think about the state of Minnesota and they think that these individuals are in really, really cold weather year round. They're really predicated on running the football. And while a lot of that is true, it's also equally as true as a lot of good defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators throw the football and can defend the pass really well. And one of the things that we've been fortunate to have here at Fairmont throughout my tenure is a really strong passing game. And in 2023 in the playoffs, we ran into a situation where we ran into a defensive coordinator who knew how to match all of our concepts. We varied them from week to week and we protected them like every offensive coordinator did, but we were running into situations where the defense was giving us certain things and our routes were simply just taking them into match coverage. And so one of the things we wanted to do was give our kids a better toolbox to answer the defensive problems that they are presenting us. Additionally, we needed, something that's more versatile to attack the middle of the field because teams knew we like to sprint out a lot. And so you're getting a lot of coverages that are going to, really try to limit the space that is outside the hashes. So that led me down a rabbit hole trying to figure out, well, what are some of these trends that are going on, whether it be in high school football or college football, that attack these spaces that I'm looking for. And so I began down a rabbit hole looking at a couple of different coaches, like the ones I can show up here, like Dan Gonzalez, Caleb Coral, Josh Herring. Josh, I actually connected with, I had the opportunity to connect with him after I had purchased his course on CoachTube. And when I did, he was super helpful in going through kind of the genesis and the why behind the seam read package that he is the one who taught me. And then from that connection, I was able to connect with Dan Gonzalez. And I sat down with him, and one day he gave me like 2 hours of his time.
Oh, that's
just kind of
awesome.
walking me through like the small little nuances that you can certainly try to infer that in his Coach 2 courses, but he kind of gave me like a master course on how to exactly adapt these things to the match coverages that, are evolving around. And then, Coach, Coral over here, he was in Minnesota for the last year at, the University of St. Thomas. And when he got here to St. Thomas, we were fortunate enough to send a kid this upcoming year to play for him, our running back. But in the process of that, I was able to talk with him and kind of meet through kind of how he teaches similar stuff. So a lot of the things that I talk about here and what I've learned, they come from these three guys right here. And so very little of it is original to me. It's more so just taking all this information that they have provided me and trying to put into something that's digestible for our kids. And it's going to basically give us a very high return on investment. We're very big on here, whatever concept we're going to invest in, we better get a high return on investment, which means we can run this concept out of all of our formations. We can find a way to protect it week to week where it's not just a one shot, one type of motion, one type of formation type of concept. So we want to find as many ways as possible to run it. Now, in a little while, after we go through kind of the nuts and bolts of it, I'll show you some film clips and you'll see we probably ran this concept, of all the drop back concepts we had, we probably ran it 15% of the time. And when you go back, like I think a lot of people do, and you go back and you look at your season, you realize, man, we did some really good stuff in this. We probably should have ran it more. And that's something that I know going into next year is going to be a lot larger component of our passing game. But first year running it, we learned a lot of good things, a lot of things we needed to fix. Certainly gave us some stuff to think about for the future.
Yeah, I love that, Coach. I've been there so many times. You go do that self-scout at the end of the year, and you're like, man, we hit 90% of the time on this pressure. And somebody goes, how many times you run it? And I'm like, 7 times. And they look at you and they go, why didn't you run it more? And I'm like, yeah, no shit, right?
Right. Exactly. But it's hard because like you get into a certain opponent and you think to yourself, well, I got to get X, Y, and Z in. And you got other things you got to worry about in terms of like getting your playmakers the ball and stuff. So, sometimes that tied with whatever other things you got going on is your 9-to-5 job, it can be tough to kind of get down into the data and work through those things.
Yeah, no doubt. 100%.
All right. So let's dig in here a little bit. You can see everything okay on your end, Coach?
Yeah. We're still on the slide with influencers, right?
Yep. You got it. Okay. All right. So some base rules here. On the left side of the screen here, you can see this part of the concept would be what we consider to be the seam read portion of our concept. We will window dress that thing up on the front side, which is going to be this part over here. We can dress that up a variety of different ways. We will most commonly dress it up with some version of a smash concept, or we're going to do some form of maybe like a seam on the other side that's a locked seam that's really isn't part of the progression, just so that they can occupy the opposite safety. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's on this side over here is mostly alerts, pre-snap stuff where it's like, if we get the ideal type of coverage, we'll throw it. If not, we'll come back here and we'll work our base reads back here in the seam read package. So like, for example, in this concept right here, our first alert would be this locked seam. So if we get man-to-man, this thing can convert to a fade, and that's what we're going to take right away. It certainly can be anything else you tag it to, but I find that this concept works a lot better when you have some sort of alert on the front side. And the way that I would recommend teaching it is you only throw it if you get a certain look that you're looking for. So for us, our quarterback knows on a given week, whatever the front side combination is going to be, the only time you throw it is if you get this combination. And we determine that if based on film study. So are they a cover 4 team? What's our best cover 4 beater that's going to get us really easy completions? That's what we'll put on the front side for a given week. So let's go into now just the two components of the seam read. In every single thing that we do with any kind of seam read, there's always going to be a seam read runner. And then there's sometimes will be what we call a circle read runner. And those terms come from Josh Herring and kind of the teaching that he came with. This individual over here, our X wide receiver, we call that the seam read because he is literally stemming into the seam to make his read up the hash. We prefer to have it at about 8 to 10 yards, as you'll see on the next slide. And at that 8 to 10 yards, they're going to be then making a decision, which I'll go into more detail in the next slide. This receiver here, the H on this screen, is running what we consider to be a circle read. The only reason we call it a circle read for us is just because that's what Coach Herring used it as. And really what he's going to be doing is we tell him the landmark's going to be up the numbers, and his landmark's going to be about 4 to 6 yards. And I'll go through kind of the teaching points on that as well. But the first thing to know about just seam reads is there's 2 basic components that you're going to hear me talk a lot about. A seam read, which again is coming here from this X wide receiver, and then a circle read, which is coming over here from our interior receiver. And the circle read always comes from the next adjacent receiver. So if we're in 3x1 over here and say the H is lined up right here, which you'll see a lot of our clips, this is kind of how we ran it. The next adjacent receiver then would be your halfback. And so he would then be the guy who runs the circle read. Now, with that in mind, let's go kind of to the next piece of things here as well. So when we look at our seam read package, for us, the seam read is, in terms of how we get to our landmarks, is dictated by where our receiver starts. So for example here, this X wide receiver, his original alignment is putting him at the top of the numbers. So he knows that in his first couple steps, he needs to stem his route to get to the seam and then work vertically upon that seam. If he were a little bit closer by alignment, let's just say he was right on the seam, maybe we're in a condensed formation of some sort, then he doesn't need to stem his alignment on his original release. He can stay right up the hash right away. We do like, though, him to come from distance because it gives the switch switch seam component to it. And when I get to the end of the presentation, I'll show you how we also build in some other switch releases into our offense that actually makes this window open up a lot cleaner. Like we like a lot of switch released, coming in like this and running a smash off of it. So when you're doing things like that, you're putting the doubt into the safety's mind that he's seen the smash over the times, which will then make your interior reads a heck of a lot easier. So I would strongly recommend anybody who's going to invest in what I'm talking about today, the first thing I'd tell you to do, find some other ways to protect the concept. If you want to use the switch release, you better have something else coming off other than just simply the seam read. Otherwise, you're just going to sit on it. And it'll drastically cover up your clarity in your read. So when we look here with this release, you're again getting up the hash on the seam read, and then at about 8 to 10 yards, you need to make a decision. And it's a 2-part decision. So when we are teaching this to our kids, we compartmentalize it first by teaching the first part of the decision. So the first part of the decision is they need to locate the nearest defender along the seam. And so we tell them to look, if the seam is right here or the hash is right here, he needs to find the closest defender that can get on top of that seam. We first tell him to look towards the sidelines. If there's a safety sitting right outside the sidelines, he's the guy you're going to be reading. If, for example, there's a safety towards the middle, that's the guy you're going to read. And there's pretty good assumption you might get some sort of rotation, or you might have a guy just sitting right on top of the hash. But we got to have him identify the safety right away. And if the safety disappears, that's going to be an indicator for our route. So the first thing is to identify where is the safety. So let's imagine, just for the sake of this demonstration, the safety is located right here. So the first part of his decision is, can I get on top of that safety and can I beat him vertically? He has to make that decision by 8 to 10 yards. And so at 8 to 10 yards, if he's unsure that he can get past him, it's an automatic curl read. If for at any reason that he believes that, you know what, I trust my speed, despite what space might exist in between here, he should be telling himself, then beat him over the top and get this thing vertical, but stay on the hash. If he starts veering into like more of a fade type piece, he's going to run into the circle reads route or potential read that he's going to make. So a couple big teaching points there. Number one, 8 to 10 yards. You got to make sure you make that decision there. Now, one of the ways we will drill this is we'll just simply put a cone right here at 8 to 10 yards. We'll put a defender or we'll put a coach here, and we'll just have him do a couple of different reads. The first one is he's going to rotate. So he's going to maybe rotate down. If he gets a rotation down, that means all this space back here is vacated. That's an automatic stay up the seam read. So if he gets any kind of rotation that's down, either towards the seam or towards the middle, it's an automatic make that into a vertical read. If he gets the safety kind of just buzzing his feet and not really moving much depth, then we give it up to the receiver to make his decision based on his own skill set. A lot of the receivers you run this with, if they see buzzing feet, they think all of them that they're track stars and they're going to be able to blow the doors off and go vertical. Just got to live with that if you're going to give them that kind of power. And then the last one that you'll also see them do is you'll see them get depth. When you see them get depth, that's going to be your automatic then curl read. So those are the three that we do. And obviously we can move the depth in terms of like where they are starting. Maybe they might start in the pressed alignment. Maybe they might start wherever. You can vary that up. But by having this cone here, it gives the kids a visual of this is where I have to make my decision by. And I would say probably by, rep 8, 9, or 10, they're starting to get comfortable with it where you can remove that cone. We do this drill at least once a week during the season because it needs constant maintenance. And what we'll eventually do is put some sort of defender, whether it be, an alley player over here or a press corner, to kind of make it more of a game-like feel as well for our seam reader. Now, once this near safety, once you've read that the first decision, do I go vertical or do I then turn into a curl? Let's imagine he's now got the curl read. Once he's got the curl read, it gets to the second part of his decision-making process. Which window is available for me to curl into? So a lot of that's dependent upon once I've made my decision and I'm turning in, I'm getting eyes as to where is the window for the quarterback to throw into. And for us, what we're going to look for is when he turns his face to go more horizontally, does he see anybody inhibiting his ability to continue on going this direction horizontally? If he sees anybody inhibiting his way, it's telling him, I need to sit down right away. If he doesn't see anybody, then what we tell him, keep going until you get no further than over the middle of the ball. And the reason why we say that is because at some point in time, if he just continued on all the way over here, like almost like a basic route or a dig route, he's going to run out of the window that's available and possibly going to run into our front side concept. So we got to give him some sort of boundaries and some barriers in which to work in. So we tell him, as you turn around, if you see anybody in the wrong color jersey in your line of vision here, sink and hitch up right in here. Also, though, if you don't see anybody there, so you get maybe like a Tampa look, you got a guy bailing and going towards the middle, or if you get a guy who's blitzed, then you can kind of continue on right into this area right here, but do not exceed the center of the defense or the center of the offense. So again, that gives our guys enough freedom in which they're really going to be working one of two windows, the window right inside the hash or the window right over top of the center, which is by our experience where the windows most likely exist anyway within the defenses that we see. So with that being said, any questions you got so far, Coach?
No, not yet. I'm going to have some here in a minute.
Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. Gotcha. So let's go now so that's the seam read. The next part of it then is going to be looking at, okay, well, how do we run the circle read? With the circle read, it can become a little bit more complicated because you're going to see a lot of different defenses do different things with this corner that's going to be occupying the area over by the numbers. So what we do is what Josh Herring kind of teaches his players to do in terms of read. The circle reader, when he gets up to his landmark, which we're going to say is on top of the numbers, the only guy he can read is the corner. So the reason I tell you that, let's imagine the corner is playing some form of a man-to-man coverage, and he sees this inside release on the seam read, and he starts to bail and goes towards the middle of the field. What we think the best course of action is to tell this guy, if he disappears, it's an automatic turn into like what we consider almost like a wheel, but it really is a seam on top of the numbers. And the reason for that is because the guy who's likely going to cover him is either going to be a safety here at depth, and if he has to come all the way over to here to defend this guy coming up here, well, now we have this safety and this area with leverage on a corner who's likely trailing.
Yeah.
The alternative to that is if we didn't have him read the corner, he being the circle reader, and let's imagine the circle reader now is going up his landmark, and he gets to 4 to 6 yards, but this safety is working over his line of vision. Well, now he might sit right in this area, and the safety now is going to be able to potentially come back over and cap this route, depending on how far he's getting into his drop. So what we also want to do is make it as simple as possible for our guys. So we tell them the only guy you can read is this corner. And so if the corner disappears, it's an automatic vertical read for you, because likely you're probably getting a linebacker in space trailing you, and we're going to let your God-given ability hopefully overtake to hopefully have a window right back over to here. Now, with that being said, the corner also defines your read really easily in like a cover 4 or a cover 3, because as they get depth, when you get to 4 to 6 yards, you're going to hitch up. The next part of what we teach our guys is for them, when you've made your decision at 4 to 6 yards, once you've decided, am I going vertical or am I hitching, your window then becomes back towards the sideline. And so what we want them to do is come back towards the sideline so that way they stay away from any late breaking alley defender or flat defender that may be coming in. I will be honest, this is a long throw, so you have to take that into consideration. What can your quarterback do? If your quarterback can't make that throw, then one of the things I would tell you is maybe then make this circle read not have the landmark of the top of the numbers. Maybe you make it, halfway in between or something like that to shorten up the throw. Whatever it is to make your quarterback work, because at the end of the day, if your quarterback can't make the throw, then this part of the concept, which I find to be the most valuable part of it, is going to be obsolete for you. So,
are you guys putting the back out at all, or are you 6-man protection on this typically?
No, I find the most success in this in 5-man protection and using the back in this. I don't personally, this last year, we did not have a ton of success with this out of 2x2. Just because what would happen for us is when we get into 2x2, this window right here for the seam read, it would almost always be a hitch read of some sort. And then this guy over here would have to fight through some sort of a walled defender. And the timing just never seemed to catch up for us. And so I don't know if just the picture was not schemed up well enough for me. But once we get into 3x1, when this guy's not in there, the ability to wall this defender becomes more difficult because now the back out of the backfield's eliciting more of an immediate reaction by that alley defender.
Yeah, and just for those of you listening, when he says 3x1, he means throwing it backside to
Correct.
The single in the running back on the seam read.
That's correct. Yes, sir. So, and when I get to my clips, you'll see most of them are run out of 3x1, but thrown to the single receiver side. So that's kind of our basic there. So we got our seam read, which again, 8 to 10 yard landmark of making the decision. Do I go vertical or do I hitch? And then again, for the seam read, which window do I hitch in? The circle read's much simpler. It's 4 to 6 yards. Am I going vertical or am I hitching up? And if I'm hitching out, we're telling our guy, we want you to work back towards the sidelines, almost like a mini comeback route towards the sideline. So that's kind of like the base rules. I've kind of talked about how we drill the play. The same way that we drilled the play, having that cone or that safety here for the seam read, you can do the exact same thing here with the circle read. And what we'll do is have that coach there, we'll have a corner there, we'll have whomever there, and we'll drill it, like I said, once. It's part of our individual, our EDDs, once a week in practice. And I will tell you, if you're going to get good at this, you need to spend a lot of time on this. We started it in the summer and would practice it in the summer. We weren't very good at it till probably week 2 or 3. And the work we put into that didn't yield the investment until really come playoff time. And this play literally saved our season, or at least kept it on life support in the state quarterfinals game, because it's 4th and 13. And I asked our guys, what do you believe in right now? And they said, get me one-on-one with the seam read and I can win.
Love it.
So that is something that, again, when you give the kids the power to make decisions, they take ownership of it. And they, a lot of times, more than not, will get you into the right situation and make you look like a genius. So the other thing I want to say here, because you're going to see some clips of this towards the end, is we don't just always, so like whether we're running it out of 2x2 like you see in the picture here, we don't always have a circle read. And the reason why I say that is because if I want this interior receiver to run a seam read, but I don't want this outside guy over here to run a circle read, because maybe I found a matchup I like, maybe it's in man-to-man, or maybe it's just on the safety, I know I can isolate him by just simply having him here and him doing some sort of a route out here. You can do that, and we do that as well. And if that's the case, again, the seam read still has the exact same type of landmarks, exact same type of rules. The one thing we will add then to this is now, if you are an interior slot receiver and you are running the seam read, your read now can take you past the midline of the formation. So you can go past the center if you are running it from the slot. Now, I will be honest with you, we have a tag for that. So we don't make the kid make that decision on the fly. We give a special extra tag at the end that lets him know, hey, you can go and exceed the pass. Because when we're running it out of the slot, a lot of times we're telling ourselves, we're probably going to get some sort of single high defense. So he's going to be a guy in the middle of the field. So if he doesn't feel comfortable bending it up this way because he's getting maybe cover one, we want him to be able to work to space. Well, that space might take him past the center. So we want him to have the ability to do that. All right. So with all that being said, now we're going to look at a couple of different clips. Now, I know huddle sometimes can be kind of glitchy here.
Yeah, how we slow-mo it, Coach, it usually helps the best.
That's kind of what I was planning on. So I want to show you a couple things here first. One of the things we found out is when we tag or when we run, so for all transparency, for our seam reads, we tag the receiver as their own little call sign to tell them that they have a certain seam read. So for example, this is our X wide receiver. His tag or call line is Sue. So he knows that when we're running Sue, he's got the seam read. Then we consider our halfback or our tailback in this our F. So the F is running the circle read. So you can kind of see that up there. Okay. What's going on over here then is determined by our play call. We can run whatever we want. In this case, our most favorite one that we pair with this is we'll have this guy on a locked seam to make sure that this guy over here doesn't get into our seam read. And then we'll run like a double in concept here, which again, we could throw, but a lot of times we're only throwing this if we see pressure here pre-snap and we know that we can drill it into this receiver right here. But then we also have, as you're going to see here, backside when we run this circle read. The other reason why I like it out of the halfback, it's a built-in hot if you get pressure from the boundary. And you'll see this, we get a ton of pressure from the boundary. So as a result of that, this is a nice built-in hot to your halfback running the circle read. So what you're going to see here is this team is going to be in like a really soft cover 4. And one of the things I'm going to have you kind of focus on here in this clip is you're going to see our receiver. He's not looking at the ball. He's watching this guy right away. Because right now, he's telling him he's within 10 yards. I can beat him. And a lot of our receivers feel that way, that when these defenders are lined up 10 yards or in, they're telling themselves, I know I can beat him. So his first thing that he's going to be watching is, does he get any depth with his first couple of steps? Because that's going to alter my read and my progression. So here we go. We're going to start here. You can see this pressure coming in. Now, this is our 5th game or 4th game of the year, so we're still learning some things. By the end of the season, the quarterback will see this pressure, and he'll tell himself, I'm off of this. I'm going here because this is going to be a really easy blitz beater. Whoops, sorry about that. And he'll be able to deliver it with space and timing rather than trying to read the full progression. So here we go. We're going to go slow here. As you can see here, the eyes of this receiver now are focused on the safety. He's 2 or 3 steps in, and he hasn't moved. So this guy's knowing, I'm taking the seam. And so now he's also knowing that he needs to get to the seam because that's where the ball is going to be delivered. We teach our quarterbacks that if you're throwing the seam, it needs to be thrown on the seam. And we tell them, put it right behind the ear of the safety. We don't want a lot of loft on it. We want this at like a 2 trajectory, kind of like your side pocket fade. That's kind of what we're telling our quarterback to work on. So to drill that with our quarterbacks, we actually run this on the opposite side of the goalposts. So we'll be outside of the end zone. Quarterback will take his drop, and then we're going to have the cones set up almost at the edge of the end zone. And so our quarterback has to then throw that seam read ball over our goalpost, and that gets the appropriate trajectory for our quarterback. So you can see here now, I'm going to kind of keep this going forward. There's not a lot of movement, and this safety's actually getting depth.
Poaching.
Yep, he's going towards the middle of the field. So now, as long as our quarterback can set his feet, which he does here, and now he delivers it, you have a safety corner over here that's in a bind because he's trying to play his quarter, but he's also looking that he's got a wheel route coming his way. So he's going to at least have hesitant feet. So now if you throw this on time, which he does, puts it right over the ear hole, right on the safety, our receiver makes a heck of a catch. So I'll run that back one more time here, just kind of slow motion all the way through. But our quarterback has his eyes right away on that safety in the field, or on the boundary, excuse me. He likes it, puts it right on top of that seam. And that's honestly what a lot of the catches are going to look like. At one point, it's going to look like, oh, I don't know if this is going to happen. He's step for step. That's why it's on timing. And you put that ball out to here, your guy or nobody.
Yeah.
You make a lot of yield off.
That's what I was going to say. The important part about that is when you throw the ball like that, your risk of interception becomes a lot more minimal than people would think. Because like you said, your guy almost has to make a spectacular catch. So unless the DB's super on top here, which I get it, you guys sit down at that point, there's probably not a risk of an interception.
And again, a lot of the things that you can do with your quarterback too, you can build his confidence on what you're going to see through film study. So like when I'm sitting down with my quarterback in our pregame meetings, we will have a time that says, okay, here's what our script's going to look like in terms of our plays, but here's how we think they're going to defend our seam read. And so we go through clips that they show us like, okay, it's probably going to be a lot of sitting week. So then when we're doing indie time, we're drilling that more often than when we're drilling this, seam read type stuff.
Yeah, I think another good point here too, just this is a defensive guy talking to offensive guys, is that it's 4th and 9 here. So those defensive guys are going to be a little more flat-footed because they're told to protect those sticks. They're just really not expecting a vertical right there, right? They're expecting you guys to try to find the sticks and move the chains. So it's another good piece to that.
Yeah. And honestly, I love this concept at any time, but 4th down's almost perfect because, again, you throw that interception, it's the equivalent of a punt at this point.
Yeah.
Which gives this guy a tremendous amount of confidence that if he feels any desire to rip it, he's going to do so. So this is just the tight version of it. I think we got the point from that, but we're going to go to this one here. So now this is an example of, this would be now 1 week later that we've done this. This is our backup quarterback who's in, and he, just like our starting quarterback, has drilled this for the last couple of weeks. And he knows now against this team who loves to bring pressure, if any type of pressure is coming to the boundary, he knows I am off of this, and it becomes a one read progression. I'm throwing it to this circle read right here. And the reason why we do that is because you never, if you wait for him to get to the 4 to 6 yard mark right here, you might be sacked by then. So building in accelerators for your quarterback to say, yep, I see this, so I'm going to this is perfect. Because at the end of the day too, if you're late on it, let's say he shows blitz, but then he kind of comes out, you still have this guy having the ability to make it right at 4 to 6 yards. He's either going to hitch it up, and I know I'm throwing it to him, or he's going to beat the guy vertically. So there's a built-in comfort level of, I have a lot of options, and they don't always have to be wrong. So you can see here, as I put this in slow-mo here, you see the pressure coming here. We're getting 2 off the edge, which is even better. As we get 2 off the edge, this guy's taking that corner to flip hips. He's late on this. And our running back makes a great play. But had he been quicker on it with more reps, he would have been able to make that read with a little bit more decisiveness. Okay, let's see it from the tight here. So he should be looking here, saying, I got 2 off the edge. I'm for sure coming over here to the circle read. So as we get a snap here, 2 come. Now, let's imagine he just ignored this whatsoever. Watch this seam read come into the line of sight. He could have thrown this, and he would have been there, but he would have been killed. So, there's a trade-off here too. And the other reason I showed this, look at this receiver. This receiver on that locked seam, look how far in he got, and look what now the safety's doing, right? He's coming over to here, which is going to make it problematic. So that if it was protected properly, this could be the difference between a touchdown because this backside guy didn't do it. So it's for love of the game route a lot of times, but you really got to coach that piece to it because, again, see him now, he's turning and now trying to get back out here, but by that time it's too late. So if you're going to invest in this, that's another small teaching point of you got to make sure that whatever's on your front side is going to somehow stress the defense to keep other defenders out of your line of sight. Same game. This is later on in that drive. This is literally 2 plays later. And hopefully the quarterback picked up on the pressure. Here it comes again, now just from distance. He sees it now, and he's going to get it out earlier. Now again, allowing the receiver, the running back time to take the ball and make a first down for us. So I like this play in the red zone a lot, but one of the things that you'll find out in the red zone is this is the guy that makes a lot of the plays in the red zone. Just because this guy runs into more condensed space.
Yeah, it's a tough cover in the red zone, especially like you said, once it gets compressed. The running back coming out of the backfield, and typically as the field gets more compressed, you have less ability to hide the change off, right? Like when you're in the big part of the field, we can play games of safeties in the corners and the backside. Once you get in that compressed 10-yard set, we have to start doing a little more, zero and stuff like that. So it's
Correct.
I agree with you. It's very good down in the red zone, especially the low red zone.
Yes. And I would add to this too. We didn't have our tag on here, but if we wanted to, with a lot of coordinators, there's a lot of times where there's a line where they will eventually go to man coverage. For this team, they're going to play zone till you get further deeper into the red zone. So if we were to run this concept within like the 15-yard line, I would say it would be helpful to tag that to the ability for that inside locked guy on this side over here to have an interior type of breaking route that would exceed this area here. And by having that tag in there, that tells you that if I didn't get this right away, and maybe I didn't want to come to this, I would have a third option as part of the read progression. But again, that's totally optional if that's something that you want to do. Okay, so this is just another example of late in the game. This is our last regular season game. Another example of to the boundary here, throwing the circle read. You can see they're in man-to-man coverage here. Our quarterback sees the pressure off the edge, gives himself a little space, underthrows it a little bit, but again, crucial play for us on second and distance and a real simple read for us. Now coming back here, again, let's talk about this right over here. Small nuance, but watch what happens to this slot receiver. Look where he's going. Look how he's working into this hash.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge no-no. And it might have just been nerves. It might have been whatever, but like this guy is making a hitch read. He's got no chance of catching that ball when this receiver is not giving him any space. So had he stayed up this hash over here, one of the things you could argue potentially is maybe the safety that's going to make the play that's located over here. He comes with it more, and now this is a touchdown. So like, I can't stress enough how you have to drill this backside portion because everything's complementary in this. And when we run the seam read with so many different receivers, they eventually come to the conclusion of they're going to do it for me so I can do it for them.
I need to do it for them, yeah.
So I'm going to skip past that one. So now here we're out of 2x2. And so I told you we struggle with it out of 2x2 all the time. But then here again, it's 4th and 10. It's a great time for us to call it. We're going to motion this receiver over because we know we're going to get rotation. And when we get rotation, it's going to then sometimes give clues to this backside receiver here in terms of what his read might be. Because if all of a sudden you're bringing motion this way, he might get a ton of depth towards the middle of the field that might more easily define what his seam read is going to look like. So if you can add motions into it, sometimes it'll help the defense tip their hand, and it'll also help clear up the reads faster for the quarterback and for the receiver. Now you'll see here, the running back is wide open. This is week 3 of our season, and he quite honestly wasn't really all that comfortable yet with identifying pressures. So had he identified this pressure earlier, he would have had a touchdown to the running back. But instead, he makes a really good throw here to our X receiver. So here comes the motion. See how we got this safety now drop into the middle of the field. What that told him was that if he's driving towards the middle of the field, he thought that meant this is going to be vacated because he's going to be following in some sort of man-to-man. And so he told himself, I'm going to have leverage on this corner. I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what he's telling himself. So he does get leverage, but this guy, again, he looks back here and he hesitates for a second. And that's all that it really takes for him to get space and get behind these guys, especially if you got a burner there. But really, with all this pressure over here, this is the guy who should be getting the ball thrown to him. Even if it might not result in a touchdown, that's the proper read. Instead, he makes a great throw, a great catch, but we're more fortunate there than proper in our reads. We should have been a little bit more disciplined. Okay, here's another one out of like a 2x1. So now it's still kind of a 3x1 presentation. We're still going to work back here to our single receiver. But what we'll also do, and I don't have any clips of it actually working because we never actually got it to work, but we will put like a fullback here or an H-back, and we will have him run the circle read. It's not always our halfback. He can be really anybody. And quite frankly, that by having this like 2x1 set, we got a very similar look that we did out of 3x1. And again, I liked it better that way than we do out of 2x2. But here, again, just one more example. He sees him within 5 yards. He's already telling himself, Unless this guy gets great depth, I'm taking this thing over the top. So again, that's a pre-snap piece on his part. He will drop this one, but you can just see he's got this guy burnt because he's flat-footed, and as long as he catches the ball, he would have had a really big play for us. Now, the next part of what I want to go into, I think we've kind of gone enough of that seam read piece of the place. I want to go into how do we package it, so how do we protect it? And I talked about like having some form of a switch release. So for us, one of our favorite switch releases is having some form of like a switch release here by the slot, bringing him out on like some form of a switch release smash concept with this guy getting flat and then this guy running it for love of the game route. We will also do this where the guy number one out here will run that inverted smash route as well. But you can do it however really you want to. But the reason why we do it is because we want the safety looking at this type of the route as much as we possibly can. So in this case, we see a team that's playing a lot of too high. So we were going to run more of that stemmed corner route from the slot, just so that safety sees it. And once he sees it over and over and over again, we think that's going to make it easier then for that seam read to get over top of him or have an easier defined read for him. So again, something simple here. We're sprinting out to it. Again, you can see here, this isn't anything expensive. It's not an elaborate concept, but I'm telling you, you need to run this in order to help your seam read really flourish. Because if you don't, again, modern defenses are really smart. They're very well coached. They're going to notice certain nuances that you only run with the seam read, and they're going to be able to match it. Here's another example of the exact same thing, just from a different view. So we're doing it here out of the slot. A tight throw here, but again, helps to protect it. Now, the next part of what we do, we like to run this a lot out of empty. So one of the things you'll see here out of empty is we can run it if we want to the two receiver side over here. If we did that, what we would do is you'd have this guy on the circle read over here, and you'd have this guy on the seam read. So nothing out of the ordinary there. But that's not what this clip is. This clip is we're going to run a one-person seam read with built-in hots/alerts on the outside. So one of the ways we'll do that is he's on a locked seam, that he should take care of this safety right here. He's on a locked seam. He should take care of the safety right here. What that should allow us to do then is to get our guy that's running the seam read, which is the guy here in the box. He should be either one-on-one running a seam read on this defender as safety, potentially a nickel down here, but he should be having a read that's going to be a little bit easier to find than coming over here and trying to read a safety. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when we do this, I add that tag of, okay, now that you're going against different defenders with different coverage responsibilities, and also knowing that this guy here who's running more of a fade, this guy over here is running more of a fade, the space you have to operate with is more condensed. So then we give him that tag and ability to, you can exceed the center here and running more of a dig route. Okay. Now, what you're going to see on this one, though, that's not going to be the case. He's going to get the seam where he needs to be because this safety is going to widen with our slot fade. And so, again, with this, you do need to run a healthy amount of slot fade, and we do within our stick concepts. So having that as part of your arsenal is something to protect it with as well. And then with as soft as this coverage is, our quarterback, if he doesn't like it, will have two easy hitch routes here to come back to as outlets. So you can see here now, as the play comes in, he's going to know that nobody's covering the seam, and you'll even notice he'll throw his hand up and let him know he's ready. See, he's like, yep, get it to me now. And so our quarterback's actually late. I'd want him to throw it a little bit sooner than this because this right here is where I want that ball layered into, right over this guy's ear hole. But he's a little bit late and throws it a little bit deeper. And quite frankly, is just fortunate that this safety takes a little bit of a poor angle on it. Okay, so he makes that reception, gets caught with a turf monster. But again, that's one of the options that you certainly can have. All right, so here's another look at it. Again, his eyes, you can see here, his eyes are on this the entire time. Is where is, like, we tell him, think about this almost like it's going to be, it's little like, I don't know if you want to call it a pipe or if you want to call it like just some sort of a vertical stemming vision line. And if that looks clear, the runway's clear, just keep on going up. If it gets cloudy, that's when you need to get to your hitch. So you can see here, his eyes the entire time are right here. Sees that it's clear. Yep, he wants it. Now, he should be trying to get more back up to this hash, but again, the ball brings him into it based on the concept. Makes a great catch. So now here again, that same team that we talked about that brought a lot of boundary pressure. This again, we told him, same concept I just ran in the last one where we got 2 slot fades and hitches on the outside. We also then tell this receiver that if you're looking up this hash here and you get field pressure, that should tell you then to bend this thing in and replace where the blitzer came from. So you can see here, we are late in identifying pressure. And doesn't come from the field. So you can see here, if he wanted to and saw this middle defender vacate, we would give him the ability to work into the space that was vacated. He didn't see it, which is okay because it's a lot to ask for a guy to get his eyes not only pre-snap over along the hash, but also to see over here. So you can see then what the quarterback does then is tries to bring him into that space with the throw. So like, I know from the outside, you're looking at this and saying, oh, he's just throwing it up. He knows exactly where he's throwing here. He knows where the blitzer's coming from, and he knows the only way this ball's being caught is if that ball's thrown into the vacated area where he's leaving. So it's either going to be an incomplete pass or our guy's going to work to it. And so he does that.
Now, do you teach there, because I've heard a lot of offensive guys talk about this, to just throw to the open grass, and if you're in your, it's your job's got to go track it down, basically?
Yep. That's how we teach our quarterback to read, in terms of the availability of grass. We don't want him reading the stemming of our routes because, quite frankly, we have a lot of different stems, and he might have a lot of different things, that can deter it. The only time we want him reading, like the release of the route, is if it's an accelerator. So, for example, certain route concepts we have are if he's collided, you're off of it. So, like, he knows based on the family that we have whether that's in play or not. So, like, just looking at this call here. So we got our fade concept on, which is that slot fade. And then we got the X Sioux. So he knows here that it's part of the Sioux family, which is the seam read family. So he's not going to be reading any type of, defenders. Now, if I had like a flood tag onto it or whatever else it might be for our vernacular, then he would know that is part of the read. You can see here, I know it's fast, but.
No, I mean, it looks, again, it makes perfect sense, right? If you're a Florida guy that's listening, right, the Dolphins, like that's what they talk about a lot with Tua, right? They tell them to throw to grass, and they tell those fast guys to go track it down, right? Waddle and Tyreek. I know you don't have Waddle and Tyreek, but the concept's the same.
Yeah,
you wish you did, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, the guy that we ran this with last year, he had really good speed, but his speed's like 4.5, 4.6 speed. It's not the level of those world-class athletes by any means. So what I talked about this earlier, like that state quarterfinal game, that this concept saved our season. Here's the clip. And this is late in the game. We are down by 7 and we are on life support here. And we need some sort of conversion to pick us up. And in this play here, it's 4th and 13. We know we got to go for it. And so we had kind of had a feeling that we were going to get man-to-man. And so in this play call, we knew that, okay, this guy is going to get man-to-man with their nickel, and that was confirmed when their nickel is lined up head up top. And he was a fantastic defender, right? And so we know that if he's going to be asked to go through and try to do a seam read and catch back here, it's just not possible, especially with the depth of these safeties. So what you don't see here is we told them in the huddle, if the safeties are beyond the sticks, we want to go to that tag. And that tag is going to tell this receiver then, I want you to convert this from a seam read into a square dig. So what you don't see is he's got a closed fist right now. That's telling this guy right here, hey, I'm converting this bad boy to a dig. And so watch how this thing kind of develops. And again, it's something simple. But as this develops, he's going to be collided right at the stem of his top. He's going to lean into it for a second to let this clear out. And then he's going to then work to that space that's now vacated there and get up the hash. And that saved our season. And we were able to take that, go score a touchdown, get a stop, score another touchdown, and unfortunately lose, with a 2-point conversion at the end of the game. But like that was something that came from the drilling in the offseason. That came from the 1 day a week of practice when we were building these things in. And quite frankly, like having this dig tag was not something I anticipated we needed. But as we played teams and I saw how they were defending it, I knew that this was something that we had to troubleshoot. And so that's what I would tell any coach who's listening to this is, as you build the base seam read package, like I'm taking Coach Herring and Coach Gonzalez and all their rules, that's our base, but they're facing different problems than I'm going to be facing. So the troubleshoots that I build in are specific to the teams that I'm going to be seeing on a given week. So we knew there's a possibility of getting man-to-man coverage against these guys. So we had to know that there needed to be some sort of a hand signal to let us know, hey, I'm not going to be able to seam read here. We're going straight to a dig, especially when we're doing a single wide receiver seam read. Now, if we're doing like a circle read type thing too, you can do the exact same thing to, if you're getting hot or if you're getting a certain type of look, giving your receiver or your quarterback some sort of a indication of, hey, I'm going to adjust this route to adapt to whatever the defense is doing.
Yeah. No, I think it makes a lot of sense, Coach.
Thanks. So here's just now another example here of the exact same concept I just showed you. In this case, he saw early on here that you had a guy draped over top of him, and he didn't like the space just based on the leverage that is here. So he always has the ability to take this profit over here to our running back who's split out here in empty. I really like seam reads guys out of empty because you get a very base set of looks from the defense. And if you package it properly with proper hots and outlets and reliefs for the quarterback so he feels like he has answers, you should feel pretty comfortable being able to get the shots when the situations provide for it, and then also having outlets in case you don't have the situation that you're looking for. So you can see here, he didn't like the picture, looks a little bit cloudy, just flips it out to his check. So that's kind of it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here just a little bit and turn it back over to you. But, Coach, I mean, it's a very expensive concept to work in. I can tell you right now, we're already adjusting it a little bit for next year. We need to get better out of it by 2x2. But even if you can't get it as good out of 2x2, find the system that it works best for you. For us, it was empty and then 3x1 thrown to a single wide receiver and our running back. But again, everybody can be a little bit different.
Yeah, Coach, I like it. And I think the main message that I cue in on is, besides the physical seam read itself, is that you went out and you found this answer or whatever, and then you adapted it to who you were. And I think that's what I love about this podcast. We talk with coaches all the time. And it's not, hey, we went and we took this from so-and-so and then we just installed it the way it was, right? We took it, we learned it really, really well from this coach, and we installed what worked for us. And then we found beaters or change-ups that worked for us, right? And I think that's the key to doing it great at the high school level is like, hey, we have to adapt it to us. But then, just like you said, hey, here's our answer for this, right? You have to build in those answers because when, 4th and 11 comes in a big game, if you don't have it built in, you're scrambling on that call sheet and you're not really sure what to do. And for you guys, I get it's a big play. It probably took you, but you look at it and say, hey, we feel really good about this, or your kids said, hey, I feel really good about this. And then I'm like you, when I was a DC and my kids said, we feel really good about this pressure, I'm like, well, you're not going to run anything better. If you really, really want this, you're going to run this better than anything we can do. So
Amen.
like, let's go ahead and do it. Let's cut it loose, boys. So,
right. And I think about it, with me being an O-line coach, you want to develop that mindset of it's 4th and 1 and your guys are saying we're running power, right? You love that mindset. And we will give a lot of times offensive coordinators that freedom to our players saying, and 4th and 1, if they're saying a run play they want, we'll give them that freedom. But we also got to do it with the pass game too, right? Like give our kids the ability to make decisions because they're the ones executing it. And so, we might get burned on it, but like I showed you with that clip was possible because of all the hours they put in the summer and us giving them the keys to the car, so to speak, and saying, make decisions and I'm going to support you either way. And so I think that's the ultimate thing we can do as coaches is give our kids the tools to make decisions in real life and then live with the consequences.
Coach, I'm the same way. Look, I talk about on this podcast, talk about it all the time. I called a play on defense. And I looked at the kids, said, all the checks, make the right check. And that's the world I lived in as a coach. And look, sometimes a kid made the wrong check and I knew it. And I was like, we're just going to have to play this one out. We'll talk about it on film. And it is what it is.
Yes.
So Coach, we end every podcast with the same question we ask every coach. We love this one. I think this year we're going to super cut an episode together at the very end. And it's going to be 50 minutes of this question. What is the most unique thing or kind of the coolest thing that your program does that not a lot of other people do throughout the country? And it doesn't have to be an X's and O's thing. It can be anything in your entire program.
Yeah. I mean, just to give it clear, there's a lot of cool things that we do. So as I'm picking these things, it's not just, one thing that I think is special and different. But so Fairmont is known as the city of lakes. Okay. We have 5 lakes within our city.
Jeez.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of small ones, but great for vacation. Great time up here. But one of the things our kids will do is they'll train on the beach. So like in the summer when we're doing weights and stuff like that, speed training and other type of training, it will occur a lot of times on the beach of one of our lakes, which is great because number one, it gets our kids out and experiencing, our city. It also gives now the community a chance to see all the great things and all the hard work our kids do. And the great part about it is it's almost every time when they're doing those lake workouts, it's 100% player driven. So like the seniors are the ones leading that workout. A lot of times they're doing it in the hottest months of the year. I just think that's the coolest thing because you're utilizing your surroundings and saying, we're the city of lakes, so we're going to be training on the city of lakes. And there's some cool pictures and marketing stuff you can do from that, but just kind of a neat little thing that is kind of specific to our city.
Yeah, no, I love it. Obviously, being a guy that, I'm fortunate to live in a city that has a beach. And I remember every once in a while we'd go out to the beach as a team back when I was in high school. And, you do a couple of things out there. It was always a really, really fun experience. So I love hearing that. And, anytime you can get out in the hot sun near the water, regardless of whether it's a beach or a lake, is always a lot better than one of those turf fields where it's 114 degrees.
Yes, sir, for sure.
So, well, I love it, Coach. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate everything. Again, you can look Coach up on Twitter. Coach, what's your Twitter?
Yeah, it's at Coach Brian Wille. You can kind of see my name here as it's marketed. If you guys got any questions on any of this, I'm happy to send you any clips, cut-ups that I talked about today, or any of the stuff in my notes that I have. Because again, I learned this from somebody else. I'd be happy to give it back to you. It's just my job as part of the coaching fraternity. And it's the greatest coaching fraternity and the greatest fraternity ever in the business.
No, absolutely. And that's why we do this podcast, to give back, highlight coaches across the country and have great conversation about football when, while we're not coaching and we're missing it desperately. So that's awesome, Coach. Thank you so much for coming on for me and for Coach Wille, the Board Drill Podcast. We appreciate you listening and we'll see you next week.